Unaware the wife, he pushed off the balcony, had survived and just inherited a $200 million fortune. Husband celebrated with his mistress and walked away. What she did next ruined him completely. He didn't just betray his wife. He waited until she was standing on their balcony during a special anniversary dinner, told her to admire the view, and used the trust she had in him to push her straight over the rail. Seconds later, Elena Carter's body crashed onto an old maintenance awning 2 floors below, then into the bushes. Her world went black before she could even scream. Upstairs, Mark didn't rush down. He didn't call for help. He quietly picked up her phone and bag from the living room, hid them deep in a closet so no one would know who she was, locked the front door, and walked away. While a retired nurse named Martha ran to Elena's side and begged the paramedics to save Lena Watkins, a name she blurted out in panic when they asked who the woman was. Mark was already sliding into a silver car with his mistress, Tessa. They drove to a rooftop bar, raised their glasses, and celebrated what they thought was a clean escape. Mark believed one thing: with no ID on her and whatever name the hospital wrote down, no one would ever connect the woman who fell to his missing wife. He was sure Elena would never wake up, never talk, never be heard. What he didn't know was this: she would open her eyes. And the next person to walk into her hospital room would not be him, but a lawyer carrying a file with her late father's name on it, and proof she had just inherited a $200 million fortune that put more power in her hands than Mark had ever dreamed of touching. This is not just a story about a man who walked away laughing. It's about what happens when the woman you tried to throw away becomes the one standing above you, with money, evidence, and every reason to ruin you completely. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Elena's voice fade back into the darkness where Mark left her. When you click that button, you stand with every survivor of betrayal who chose to rise. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Elena Carter jolted awake, heart racing, fingers still trembling from the nightmare she couldn't remember. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The room was dark except for a small lamp glowing beside her work desk, where open sketches, color boards, and client notes were scattered like pieces of a life she was constantly fighting to keep together. She exhaled shakily, brushing her hair back. At 32 years old, Elena worked long nights as a freelance designer for small businesses. Logos, menus, shop fronts, anything that paid enough to support the home she shared with her husband, Mark Carter, a 36-year-old financial consultant. On the surface, they looked like a stable couple, 2 adults building a life step by step. But underneath, Elena carried an old fear she never spoke about, not even to Mark. She pressed her palm to her chest, steadying her breath. That nightmare again, the one where she reached for someone but couldn't save them. The dream always blurred, but she knew exactly where it came from. In the quiet of the room, Elena's mind drifted to a time long before adulthood swallowed her. She saw herself at age 17, seated beside the bed of Anthony Wells, her father, a once successful real estate developer who made modest fortunes through small properties. He wasn't a billionaire, but he was so financially disciplined that Elena grew up knowing he had built something secure for his only daughter. In the last year of his illness back then, money didn't matter. What mattered was his voice, soft and weak, telling her, "Family isn't something you find, sweetheart. It's something you build." She held his hand during those nights, promising she would never let herself be alone in the world. One night, the house fell so silent, she thought she'd lost him for good. Ambulance lights flashing through the curtains as they rushed him to the hospital. He survived that scare, but something in her never fully relaxed again. From that night on, she knew what it felt like to almost lose the only person who made her feel safe. Years later, his health declined again. He moved into a smaller place where nurses could check on him more easily, and Elena had to clear out the old family house she grew up in. She remembered the night she sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, holding one of his old shirts and crying like a child. Mark appeared in her life like a lifeline, calm, confident, offering comfort when she couldn't hide her grief. He came over that night to help, sat down beside her, and wrapped his arms around her. She remembered the way his voice sounded in the half-empty room. "You don't have to face anything alone anymore," he whispered. "I'm here." Packing up her father's things felt like packing up her childhood. Mark stayed, carrying boxes, joking gently, making tea. He felt like safety, like a bridge between the life she was losing and the life she could build. She clung to that promise. It was the closest thing to security she had known since those nights by her father's hospital bed. This was the root of her devotion. This was why she tried so hard. This was why she ignored the small cracks forming in her marriage. Her eyes drifted to the clock. 2:14 a.m. She rubbed her neck and stood, stretching her stiff limbs. On her way to turn off the lamp, she noticed something on the floor, one of Mark's jackets. He'd tossed it there earlier that evening when he rushed in to grab a file before heading back out again. He hadn't stayed long enough to talk. Just a quick, distracted kiss on her forehead and a, "Client emergency, I'll be late." She picked up the jacket to hang it, but as she slid her hand into the pocket, her fingers brushed something cold. A bracelet. Not just any bracelet, a gold bracelet, elegant and polished, with a small charm in the shape of a heart. The kind that didn't come cheap, the kind that would belong to someone who liked luxury. Elena frowned. She had never worn jewelry like this, not because she didn't like it, but because she'd always been saving money for their future. Mark knew that. He said it made her humble and grounded. But this bracelet, this wasn't hers. Her heart beat slower, harder. She turned the bracelet in her palm, watching the charm catch the light. It looked brand new. No scratches, no dust. Whoever owned it took care of it. On the underside of the tiny heart charm, almost too small to notice, was an engraving. Tessa. Elena stared at the name. She tried to brush it off. Maybe it belonged to a client. Maybe someone had forgotten it in his car. Maybe he'd picked it up so it wouldn't get lost. Mark had come and gone so quickly tonight that she hadn't even had time to ask about his day. Her hand tightened around the bracelet. She told herself not to jump to conclusions. She told herself people misplace things. She told herself trust was the foundation of marriage. But then that old fear, the fear of being left, forgotten, replaced, rose quietly inside her chest. She stood alone in the dim room, whispering the words her father once said. Family is built, not bought. Yet in her heart, something didn't feel built at all. Something felt like it was slipping. Elena slipped the bracelet into the small drawer of her desk, not ready to leave it in plain sight, and not ready to throw it away either. She didn't ask Mark about it. Not yet. Not when she wasn't ready for the answer. Elena believed love meant patience, even when something didn't feel right. As she walked toward the bedroom, a shadow passed across the hallway. The memory of Mark moving through the house lately, tense, distracted, whispering on the phone at odd hours, always a step away from her. She paused by the doorway, staring at his side of the bed, still empty, and then, without warning, her phone vibrated on the table, lighting up a new email notification from a sender she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Regarding your father's remaining assets, urgent." She froze. A slow chill ran up her spine. Something from Elena's past was about to rise again, and it wouldn't be small. Elena flinched at the sudden sound of a door slamming downstairs. It was so forceful that the framed sketches on her wall rattled. Her heart jumped. For a moment, she thought her nightmare had merged with reality. She pressed her hand to her chest and breathed out slowly. No, this was real. Mark was finally home. His voice drifted upward, sharp and impatient, as he tossed his keys on the counter. Great, just great, he muttered to himself, loud enough for Elena to hear. The intensity of his entrance pushed a jolt of tension through the house. Elena stepped into the hallway, listening as Mark marched into the living room without even looking up at the stairs. The man moving around down there didn't feel like the same one who once promised to stay by her side through every storm. Mark Carter, 36, financial consultant, known for his polished appearance and clean-cut charm, looked different tonight. His jaw clenched, his shoulders stiff, eyes darting as if someone had followed him home. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled in a way that didn't come from just work. He didn't greet Elena. He didn't even glance her way when she descended half a step to look over the rail. As the shock faded, Elena felt her heart beat slow into a steady ache. Here it was again. Distance. the invisible gap between them that had been widening for months. She walked down a few more steps into view, stopping in the doorway to the living room. "Long night?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Mark didn't turn around. "Meetings," he said flatly. "Clients needed updates. The market's a mess." His tone felt like a wall being built brick by brick. Elena studied his back. She remembered her father once telling her, "People change gradually, not suddenly. The clues are always there." She saw clues now, a lot of them. Mark's sudden late nights, his constant phone buzzing, the expensive bracelet in his jacket last night. And now this tension, this coldness. She thought of the email about her father's remaining assets, still unread on her phone. But something about the way Mark moved told her this wasn't the right moment to bring it up. Instead, she stepped back into the shadows of the hallway. That was when she heard it. A voice, Mark's voice, low and urgent. It was coming from the kitchen. He was on the phone. Elena moved quietly, hovering near the corner where the wall met the doorway. From there, she couldn't see him, but she could hear his words echo faintly. Mark whispered, "She won't suspect a thing. Just wait." Elena's breath caught mid-inhale. She pressed her back against the wall, her pulse racing. Who was he talking about? What wasn't she supposed to suspect? Mark lowered his voice further. "I told you, it's all under control." A pause. Someone spoke on the other end, too faint for her to hear. Then Mark said something that made the edges of her vision blur. "No, she hasn't figured anything out. She trusts me. That's why this will work." For a split second, Elena forgot how to breathe. Her fingers trembled as she covered her mouth. Was he talking about her? About a plan? She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to think Mark could ever use her trust against her. But the words hung in the air like cold smoke, impossible to ignore. Then Mark turned slightly, just enough that Elena scrambled away before he could see her. She hurried back to her desk and pretended to be adjusting her laptop screen as he entered the hallway. His face was calm, too calm. "Elena," he said with a tight smile, "did you need something?" Her throat tightened. "No, I just didn't know you were home." He nodded once, the smile vanishing faster than it came. "I'm heading upstairs to shower. Big day tomorrow." He walked past her and she felt the absence of warmth in his steps. Not anger, not stress, something else, something calculated. When she heard the bathroom door close and the water start running, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe again. She sat at her desk and pulled her laptop closer. She needed answers. She needed to know what Mark was hiding. She opened her browser and pulled open a new tab. From the desk drawer, she took out the bracelet and examined the engraved name again. Tessa. She typed it into the search bar alongside Mark's firm name. Maybe it belonged to someone Mark worked with. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe. Before she could press enter, a notification flashed in the corner of her laptop screen. It wasn't from her account. It was from the messaging app Mark had synced to the home computer months ago, so his texts would show up while he worked. A new message popped up from an unknown number on Mark's synced account. "Tonight, same place." No name, no explanation, just those 3 words. Elena's stomach twisted. She clicked nothing. She didn't want to risk marking it as read. Her hand shook as she held the edge of the desk. If the message was meant for him, what place was he going to? And who was he meeting there? Before she could untangle the thought, another notification flashed, this time on her phone beside the keyboard. An email update from the same unknown legal office that had contacted her last night about her father's assets. This time the subject line read, "Your presence is required. Details cannot be postponed." Elena swallowed hard. 2 secrets now pulled at her from opposite directions. Her father's unfinished business and her husband's. Something was happening behind the scenes, something Mark didn't want her to know, and the next day would force her to face truths she wasn't ready for. The knock on the bedroom door was so sharp, so sudden that Elena jumped and nearly dropped her phone. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Before she could answer, the door swung open. It had been a few days since the strange message on Mark's synced account and the second email from the legal office. She had scheduled a call with them for the following week, but hadn't told Mark yet. In that time, he'd been oddly pleasant, but distant, as if performing the role of a husband instead of living it. Now Mark stood there. He wasn't angry. He wasn't annoyed. He was smiling. But not the warm smile she remembered. This one felt stretched, stiff, like a mask that didn't fit his face anymore. "Elena," he said softly, "get dressed. I have a surprise for you." Her pulse raced. After the late-night whispers, the bracelet and his recent detachment, the sudden shift in his tone hit her with confusing force. "A surprise?" she asked cautiously. Mark nodded. "It's our anniversary weekend. I think we should celebrate early. Just us." There was no warmth behind his eyes, no excitement, just calculation. Still, Elena forced a smile and followed him downstairs. She wanted to believe this was an attempt to reconnect, to fix the growing distance between them, but her instincts whispered otherwise. The moment she stepped into the living room, her breath caught. The balcony doors were open, and soft lights flickered outside. A small round table was set up on the balcony, covered with a white cloth and 2 delicate wine glasses. A quiet melody played from a speaker beside the wall. It looked perfect. Too perfect. Mark stepped behind her and placed his hands on her shoulders. They felt heavy. "I wanted tonight to be special," he murmured. "We haven't really been us lately." Elena swallowed hard, telling herself not to be paranoid. This was their marriage, their anniversary. This should be safe. But she remembered something, a tiny detail that now pulsed in her mind like a warning light. 2 weeks ago, she had seen Mark crouch by the balcony railing with a wrench. When she asked what he was doing, he simply said, "Just tightening things up. Safety first." She thought nothing of it at the time. Mark liked fixing things around the house. And the building was older. It made sense. But now the image replayed with a new meaning. Elena followed Mark onto the balcony, the cool night breeze brushing her face. The railing behind the table looked sturdy at first glance, but something inside her twisted painfully. She took her seat across from him. As Mark poured wine into her glass, her mind drifted back to a memory she tried not to visit often. They were younger then, standing on this same balcony when life felt simple and the world seemed safe. Mark went down on one knee, holding out a ring. "Elena," he had whispered, "I'll never let you fall. I promise." It was the kind of promise she believed with her whole heart, the kind that made her feel secure, the kind that made her trust him enough to build a life. But tonight, that memory felt tainted, corrupted. Mark lifted his glass toward hers. "To us." His voice had no warmth, no happiness, just something expectant. Elena picked up her glass slowly. Her fingers trembled, and she forced herself to hide it. If something was wrong, if something dangerous was coming, she needed to stay calm. She needed to think. They toasted, the glasses touching with a soft chime that sent a shiver up her arms. Mark leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You seem tense," he said. Elena looked down at her hands. "Just tired from work, and I still need to call that legal office about my dad." For a tiny moment, something flickered in his eyes at the mention of her father. Then it was gone. He replied, eyes narrowing slightly. "Let's not talk about that tonight. Just enjoy this." There was silence, uncomfortable, heavy. She glanced at the railing. Just one glance, long enough for dread to pool in her stomach. It looked different, barely noticeable, but the join near the corner seemed newer. The metal slightly off color, as if a section had been replaced. "Elena," Mark said suddenly, drawing her attention back. He reached across the table and touched her hand. His fingers were cold. "I want tonight to be memorable," he said. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She felt ready to stand, ready to go back inside, ready to escape the sudden pressure in her chest. But Mark lifted his glass again. "A real celebration," he said. He stood up. He walked around the table. He moved behind her. Elena's breath caught. His hand brushed the railing lightly as if testing it. It gave a faint creak. Her blood ran cold. Mark looked down at her with that strange smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes. "You're safe with me," he said softly. Elena's fingers tightened around her chair. His hand pressed the rail again. Another creak, a little louder this time. Mark leaned in close, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Let's see how strong this balcony really is." The night air turned still, and Elena realized This anniversary night was not meant to celebrate their love. Tomorrow would reveal what Mark had truly been planning, and the danger waiting just inches behind her. Elena felt the air change before she heard him move. 1 second, the balcony felt open and wide, the cool night breeze brushing her skin. The next second, Mark's presence behind her turned that open space into a small, trapped corner. His shadow stretched long across the floor, swallowing the warm glow of the string lights. Her heart sped up. "Elena," Mark said softly, his tone too calm for the tension in the air. "Come closer. Look at the view." His voice was gentle. His body wasn't. Elena stood a few inches from the railing, holding her glass. Below them, the ground looked far, dark, and unforgiving. 2 floors down, the old maintenance awning stuck out from the side of the building. Rusted metal, the kind she always assumed would be removed someday. Tonight, it might be the only thing between her and the end. She glanced back at Mark. His eyes were on her, not on the view. There was no softness there, only something cold, like a final decision already made. Her throat tightened. "Mark, what's going on?" He stepped closer behind her. "You've been asking too many questions lately," he murmured. "Checking my phone, looking through my things." Fear prickled the back of her neck. "I was just worried. You've been different, distant. You should have stayed in your lane, Lena." Her chest clenched at the nickname that used to sound sweet, now twisted into something sharp. "Mark, what are you—" He moved. 2 steady hands pressed against her back and shoved. The sound of her glass shattering on the tile barely registered before the air swallowed her whole. She fell. The wind screamed past her ears. Lights blurred above. Her arms flailed, reaching for anything, everything, but there was only empty air and the brutal rush of gravity. Then, the awning. Her body slammed into it, metal bending with a sharp screech that cut through the night. The impact slowed her fall just enough before she rolled off the side, crashing into thick bushes and hard ground below. Pain burst through her body in bright, blinding flashes. Her head hit the dirt. Silence. Darkness. Her last thought before everything went black was not a word, but a feeling. Betrayal. Across the courtyard, a light flicked on. Martha Watkins, a retired nurse in her early 60s, stepped out onto her small balcony, frowning. She had heard the metal scream. She had heard the dull thud afterward. From her angle, she couldn't see the upper balcony clearly, only the courtyard below. Her eyes scanned the yard. Then she saw her, a woman, crumpled near the bushes, not moving. "Oh, dear Lord," Martha breathed. She rushed back inside, grabbed her phone and keys, and hurried downstairs as fast as her aging knees allowed. When she reached the courtyard and saw the woman up close, bruised, bleeding, unconscious, her training kicked in. "Miss, can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling beside her. No response. She checked breathing. Still there. Weak, but steady. She hit the emergency number on her phone. "This is Martha Watkins. There's a woman on the ground outside my building. I think she fell from a balcony. Please hurry." The dispatcher asked, "Do you know her name?" Martha looked at the woman's face. She had seen her around, always with a quiet smile, sometimes waving from the balcony when she watered plants. "I think her name is Lena," Martha said, voice shaking. "Lena. I've heard her husband call her that. Put down Lena Watkins for now." In the panic, she never realized she'd given her own last name instead of the woman's. The dispatcher repeated, "Lena Watkins?" "Yes," Martha said, too focused on keeping pressure on a bleeding cut to catch her own mistake. A few minutes later, flashing lights painted the courtyard red and blue. Paramedics knelt where Martha had been, checking vitals, fitting a neck brace, lifting Elena carefully onto a stretcher. "Pulse is weak but present," one of them called. Martha gripped the air in front of her chest, whispering under her breath, "Stay with me, Lena. Stay with me." Upstairs, moments after the fall, Mark wiped his hands on his pants and walked through the living room. From where the balcony was positioned, no direct neighbor could see what had happened. Only the sound had traveled. On the coffee table lay Elena's phone and small bag from earlier. He picked them up. He slipped her phone into his pocket. He tucked her bag deep into a storage closet behind old boxes, closing the door carefully. No ID, no purse, no easy way to know who she was. He checked the hallway. No one at the door. No voices yet from outside. Just distant city noise. He locked the apartment door and stepped out into the night, walking down the back stairwell instead of the main elevator, avoiding anyone who might ask questions. A few streets away, a silver car waited with its headlights dimmed. Inside sat Tessa Hayes, 32, Mark's colleague, the woman with the gold bracelet. Dressed in a sleek dress, she leaned over the steering wheel, anxiety and excitement mixed in her eyes. He slid into the passenger seat. "Well?" she asked, voice hushed. "Is it really over?" Mark let out a long breath, then smiled. A real smile, one he hadn't given Elena in months. "It's done," he said. "We're finally free." Tessa laughed softly, pulling 2 small bottles of champagne from her bag. She popped them open and poured them into plastic cups. They clinked them together. "To us," she whispered. They drove off, leaving behind the distant echo of sirens growing louder near the building Mark no longer cared about. Later that night, they would be caught on a rooftop bar camera, laughing, touching, celebrating, while Elena lay in a hospital bed under a name that wasn't hers. As the ambulance lights flashed over Elena's still body, Martha held her hand and kept repeating, "Stay with me, Lena. Stay with me." She had no idea that the wrong name she gave would become the first shield protecting Elena from the man who thought she was gone forever. Elena woke like she was being dragged out of deep water. Her whole body jerked, lungs pulling in air, with a harsh, painful gasp. Bright light burned her eyes. Machines beeped steadily around her. She tried to sit up, but a stabbing pain in her side forced her back down. Her throat was dry. Her head pounded. For a moment, she didn't remember the fall. Then the balcony flashed in her mind. Mark's hands, his voice, the feeling of nothing under her feet. She choked on a breath. A nurse hurried over, the same one who had watched over her for days now. "I'm glad you're awake," the nurse said gently. "I'm Nurse Helen, and you're safe. You've been unconscious for 3 days." Elena swallowed. "Where? Am I?" "In the hospital," Helen replied. "You were brought in after a fall from your building. A neighbor found you outside and called for help." Elena's voice came out hoarse. "My name is Elena Carter." Helen gave her a confused look and glanced at the chart hanging by the bed. "The report says your name is Lena Watkins. That's what the caller told us." Elena blinked slowly as the pieces started to connect. Martha, the neighbor. She must have heard Mark use the nickname Lena, and in the chaos instinctively said her own last name. No ID, no bag, no phone. Mark had made sure nothing tied her to him. Helen adjusted the IV line. "You didn't have any identification on you. No license, no card, nothing in your clothes. So the paramedics listed you under the name the neighbor gave. We've had you down as Lena Watkins since admission." Elena stared at the ceiling, the beeping of the monitor suddenly too loud. "Can you update it?" she whispered. "My legal name is Elena Carter." Helen nodded slowly. "Of course. It happens more than you'd think when people come in unconscious. I'll let registration know and add both names to your file so we don't lose the record." She hesitated, then added, "The neighbor who found you, Mrs. Watkins, she stayed until the doctors took over. She kept saying you deserved another chance." "From what I heard," Helen added quietly, "the police logged it as an accidental fall for now. With no identification on you and no family listed under the name Lena Watkins. There wasn't much they could do besides write up the report and move on." The words landed like heavy stones on Elena's chest. No one had asked for her. No one had come. Mark wasn't worried. Mark wasn't searching, because Mark believed she was gone. Helen glanced at her chart again, then back at Elena. "The paramedics mentioned something else when they brought you in. They thought it was strange that no one from your apartment came down to see what happened." Elena's throat tightened. "They said neighbors heard a noise and saw a man leaving the building not long before you were found." Helen continued carefully. "One of them later swore she recognized him at a rooftop bar down the street that same night, with another woman." Elena's eyes closed. Her heart didn't break this time. It hardened. Memory slid into place like puzzle pieces. The gold bracelet she found in Mark's jacket. Her online search that night. The corporate event photo that appeared when she finally pressed enter before the anniversary. Tessa Hayes, his colleague, smiling with other staff. The exact same bracelet shining on her wrist. Elena had wanted to believe it meant nothing. She had wanted to believe Mark still loved her. Now she saw it clearly. The late nights, the secret calls, the message, tonight, same place. The rooftop bar sighting. He hadn't just lied. He had built an entire future without her and tried to push her out of his. Helen noticed the fire rising in Elena's eyes. "Are you okay?" "No," Elena whispered, "but I will be." Helen gave a small, sad smile. "Mrs. Watkins kept saying the same thing when you came in. She told the doctors you deserved another chance. I think you're taking it. Another chance." The words settled deep. Not just another chance at life, another chance at choosing herself. That night, as the hospital quieted and the lights dimmed, Elena stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise. If she walked out of here, she would never walk back into Mark's shadow. She didn't know how yet. She just knew this. She would not be the woman he pushed off the edge. The next morning, when the door to her room opened again, it wasn't a nurse who walked in. It was a man in a suit holding a briefcase and a file with her father's name on it. And he was about to hand her a power Mark never saw coming. The hospital door burst open so quickly that Elena flinched, gripping the blanket as if expecting another attack. Her heart slammed against her ribs. For one terrifying second, she imagined Mark standing there with that same cold smile from the balcony. But it wasn't Mark. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, holding a briefcase close to his chest. His expression was serious but kind, as if he already knew she was in pain. He paused by the doorway, scanning her bandaged arm, the bruises on her face, the fear still lingering in her eyes. "Elena Carter?" he asked gently. Her breath hitched. No one in the hospital had called her that until Nurse Helen fixed her file earlier. They all knew her as the misidentified Lena Watkins. How do you know my real name?" Elena whispered. The man walked closer, introducing himself with a respectful nod. "My name is Robert Lane, and I'm an estate attorney. I represent your father's legal affairs." His voice was warm but firm, an experienced man in his mid-50s who handled important matters with quiet seriousness. Elena's grip on the blanket loosened. "My father? That can't be. I haven't spoken to him in years." Robert's expression softened. "I know, but he kept track of you, even from a distance." The intensity in the room settled into a heavy, emotional quiet. Elena's throat tightened. Her father, the last person she loved before Mark, was gone. "When did he?" she managed. "Recently," Robert said gently. "His health had been fragile for a long time, as you know. In his final instructions, he made it very clear that we were to keep trying to reach you, no matter how difficult it was." Guilt pricked at her chest. She hadn't seen him in years, not since their last argument about Mark. Robert continued, "Over the past few weeks, our office tried contacting you. We emailed you about your father's remaining assets and called the number listed for your husband. Each time he told us you were traveling and unreachable. When you didn't respond to our emails either, we hired someone to help locate you. That's how we found your hospital admission under your corrected name, Elena Carter." Elena thought of the subject line that had frozen her in the dark. "Regarding your father's remaining assets. Urgent." She'd meant to read it properly, meant to answer. Then Mark's behavior and the anniversary dinner had swallowed everything. "Why are you here now?" she asked quietly. Robert opened his briefcase, pulling out a set of documents. "Because despite the distance between you, your father never changed his mind about one thing." He set the papers on her lap. "Your father left everything to you. All assets, all accounts, all property. You are his sole heir." Elena blinked. "Everything? But he didn't have that much." Robert shook his head with a faint, knowing smile. "Your father was more successful than he let on. Much more. Over the years, he built a private investment portfolio, small properties, long-term rentals, equity stakes in businesses, conservative but steady investments. He kept most of it quiet so you wouldn't feel pressured or targeted." He gave her a moment, then added, "Elena, you've inherited a total estate value of $200 million. The room stilled. The beeping machines faded. The hospital walls felt unreal. Her breath trembled, her mind struggling to catch up. $200 million. A wave of disbelief crashed over her. Her father, despite their distance, had chosen her, protected her, even after she walked away. She covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled silently. He had warned her about Mark. He had seen the danger years before she did, and now, even in death, he had given her the power to rise from the betrayal. Robert continued softly. There is also a note addressed to you. I can give it to you when you're ready. Elena nodded slowly, her heart swelling with a mix of grief and gratitude. For the first time since the fall, she felt something new inside her. Strength, not anger, not fear. Strength. Images rose, sharp and painful. She was standing outside her father's smaller home, still cluttered with boxes from his move. She remembered shouting, accusing him of not supporting her relationship with Mark. Her father looked older than she remembered, pain in his eyes. Elena, that man values money more than life. One day you'll see it. She was blinded by love then. She thought he was being unfair. I love him, she had said. Why can't you trust my choice? He sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. I trust you. I don't trust him. But she had pulled away. She walked off that porch, telling herself she didn't need her father's approval. That was the last real conversation they ever had. Elena wiped her eyes. Robert remained silent, giving her time. This inheritance was more than money. It was independence, a shield, a weapon, a chance to stand on her feet and uncover the truth without Mark's control shadowing her. Elena picked up the pen Robert offered. Her hand shook as she signed the inheritance papers. The moment the pen touched the page, something shifted in the air. Mark wanted her gone. Instead, she became untouchable. As Robert packed up his case, he said quietly, There's one more thing, Elena. Something your father wanted you to see. He left it in my care months ago before he passed. I'll bring it tomorrow. Elena looked up. His eyes carried a warning. What he left behind may change everything you thought you knew. The printer spat out pages like bullets, each one hitting the table with a sharp smack that echoed in the small conference room. Weeks had passed since Elena first signed the inheritance documents and was discharged from the hospital. Her body still ached, but she could walk on her own now. She sat straight, bandaged but composed, watching as her new life, her quiet war, formed in ink and paper. At the table with her were three people. Robert Lane, her father's lawyer, calm and strategic. Daniel Reed, a seasoned private investigator with sharp eyes and a calm voice. May Turner, a digital forensics expert, her fingers moving fast over her laptop. These were not just professionals. They were her allies. Let's start with the simple part, Daniel said, sliding the first folder toward her. How he built the trap. Inside the folder was a receipt. Elena's eyes scanned it. Purchase order. Custom balcony railing section. Date, 3 weeks before the fall. Paid by Mark Carter. It wasn't a random moment, Daniel said. Your father hired me months ago to look into Mark when he started doubting him. I didn't have enough back then to confront you with, but after your accident, Robert asked me to reopen everything. This receipt came from a contractor Mark used personally. He pointed to a photo clipped to the file, an inspection shot of the railing, taken by the contractor as proof of installation. The replacement piece looked solid, but it was installed with weaker anchor points than the rest, Daniel explained. Under normal leaning, it would probably hold. Under a sudden, strong push, it would fail. Her mind flashed back to Mark, tightening the railing for safety, to the slightly different color at the joint, to the creak when he pressed on it behind her chair. It was never about safety. It was preparation. May turned her laptop toward Elena. We pulled external footage from neighboring buildings and nearby traffic cameras. Watch. The first clip showed Mark leaving their house through the side entrance, calm, locking the door behind him. Another angle from across the street caught him walking briskly to the corner. A silver car pulled up. Tessa at the wheel. Elena felt her jaw tighten. The next clip jumped to a nearby rooftop bar entrance. The security camera showed Mark and Tessa arriving together less than an hour after Elena's fall. Tessa linked her arm through his. They were laughing. May paused the frame, zooming in. Mark raised a glass in a toast. Tessa's bracelet, that bracelet, glittered on her wrist. They weren't just meeting, May said quietly. They were celebrating. While Elena lay in a hospital under a wrong name, fighting for her life, Robert slid over another stack of papers. Your father suspected something about Mark long before you did. He quietly asked us to monitor any financial ties that didn't make sense. Multiple bank transfers, same recipient, Tessa Hayes. Descriptions, future plans, new start, house fund. Elena swallowed hard. He was planning a life with her. Using you as the stepping stone, Robert said, with your father's money and his long-term sights. Your father didn't know about the attempt on your life, but he knew Mark was positioning himself. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. That man values money more than life. He had been right. May opened another file. This one wasn't easy. It was buried in an old cloud backup from Mark's phone, connected through the same account we saw messages from. She clicked play. Mark's voice filled the room, small but chilling. As soon as she's gone, we're free. I'm tired of waiting. The timestamp was 2 days before the anniversary. Surprise. Elena's hands curled into fists, but her eyes stayed dry. She wasn't breaking anymore. She was building. Can he be charged? Elena asked, turning to Robert. Her voice was calm, low, full of something new. Resolve. Robert nodded slowly. With what we're gathering, yes, this is not just an accident. This is intent. Once we give this to the authorities, they'll have enough to open a serious investigation, but we can choose when to step into the light. Daniel added, and we're not done. There's one more piece your father's records led us to. It might be the strongest. He handed her a sealed envelope. This was part of the file your father marked urgent, Robert explained. We wanted you to see everything else first. Elena opened it. Inside was a copy of a life insurance policy. Her name, her alleged signature, off, slightly wrong, not the way she signed her legal forms. Date, 3 weeks before the fall. Beneficiary Mark Carter. She felt a cold calm settle inside her. He insured me, she said quietly, then staged the perfect way to collect. May tapped the page. We already forwarded copies to a handwriting analyst. Their preliminary opinion says the signature is highly inconsistent with verified samples of yours. Elena looked up. Her eyes were no longer questioning. They were sharp, dangerous. Elena closed the folder and took a slow breath. Then we don't just show the truth, she said. We show it in front of everyone. Robert nodded. We can intervene in his insurance hearing. He thinks he's walking in to argue for a payout on your death. Instead, he'll meet you. And the next time Mark saw her, it would be in the one place he thought he'd never have to face her again. The courtroom. The courtroom doors slammed open so hard that every head jerked toward the entrance. The sound cracked like lightning. Sharp, shocking, impossible to ignore. Mark, standing beside his lawyer at the front, froze mid-sentence. He thought this hearing was about one thing only, confirming details for the life insurance payout on his late wife, whose body had never been formally recorded under her legal name. His face drained of color, because walking through those doors, alive, steady, and burning with silent fury, was the woman he thought would never walk anywhere again. Elena. Gasps rippled through the courtroom like a wave. Whispers exploded. Even the judge lifted her eyebrows, startled. Mark stumbled back a step, knocking over his own chair. His voice cracked. Elena, what, how? Elena didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't give him a single piece of the fear he once controlled. She walked forward slowly, deliberately. Every heel strike echoed with power, with survival, with truth. Behind her sat Robert, Daniel, and May, all silent pillars of support. The judge cleared her throat. Ma'am, state your name for the record. Elena stood tall. Elena Carter. Mark's jaw fell open. His lawyer, an older man with thinning hair, whispered frantically at him, but Mark didn't respond. His eyes stayed glued on Elena, as if he couldn't believe she was real. Finally, she turned her head toward him. The look she gave him wasn't hatred. It was worse. It was knowledge. Elena had practiced this moment in her mind over and over, yet now that she stood here, she felt strangely calm. Her heartbeat was steady, her breath controlled. She wasn't the frightened wife from the balcony. She wasn't the broken woman in the hospital. She was the survivor with the truth. She faced the judge. I have evidence relevant to this case, Your Honor. evidence that concerns both this insurance policy and the circumstances of my fall. Approach, the judge instructed. From her bag, Elena pulled out a thick folder, organized, detailed, undeniable. But before she handed it over, she turned once more to Mark. His face glistened with sweat. His hands shook uncontrollably. Tessa, seated behind him, sank low in her chair, eyes wide with panic. She had come to support him, thinking the court would officially free him from a dead marriage. Elena stepped onto the stand. The clerk swore her in, and the judge gestured. "You may begin, Ms. Carter." Elena opened the folder and placed the documents before the judge. Inside was everything she had collected. Security footage of Mark leaving their building and arriving at the rooftop bar with Tessa. Bank transfers labeled Future Plans, New Start, House Fund. Mark's voice memo. "As soon as she's gone, we're free." The balcony railing receipt and contractor report. Digital forensics reports tying his devices to the messages. Screenshots of Mark and Tessa's conversations, hinting at a life once things are cleared. And the judge paused at the last document, eyes narrowing. "This is a life insurance policy." Mark's breath hitched so loudly half the courtroom turned. The judge continued reading. "Elena Carter, insured for $1 million, signed 3 weeks before her fall. Beneficiary, Mark Carter." The room erupted in whispers. Tessa covered her mouth with trembling hands. Mark stuttered, I did that for protection. I didn't expect." "You didn't expect me to be alive," Elena cut in quietly, her voice filled with ice. His mouth hung open. She held his gaze, calm but deadly. "You planned a future without me. You planned everything. You just didn't plan my survival." Mark's lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial." "Silence," the judge snapped. "This evidence is damning and highly relevant to both the insurance claim and potential criminal conduct." Mark's face twisted. A cracked voice escaped him. None of this is what it looks like." Tessa, shaking uncontrollably, suddenly blurted out, "I didn't know. Mark told me he said she left him. I didn't know anything about this." Her desperation only made the courtroom louder. Mark spun on her, furious. "Stop talking." The judge banged her gavel. "Enough." The room finally quieted. The judge looked directly at Mark. "Given the evidence presented and Ms. Carter's testimony, I am suspending any decision on this insurance payout and referring this matter to the district attorney's office and law enforcement for a full criminal investigation into suspected attempted murder and fraud. Additionally, a protective order will be issued immediately. Mr. Carter, you are to have no contact with Ms. Carter." The words hit Mark like a punch. He sagged forward, breath shallow, panic crawling across his face. Elena did not look away. She watched him crumble, watched him face the truth of what he tried to erase. As the judge prepared to dismiss the room, the bailiff handed Elena a note someone had left for her at the front desk. She unfolded it. Her expression suddenly hardened. The message was written in a rushed, shaky hand. "He's not done. Watch your back." And as Elena stepped out of the courtroom, she felt it. The storm wasn't over. The most dangerous move was still ahead. The voicemail hit Mark's phone like a hammer. "Mr. Carter, this is Human Resources. You are suspended effective immediately in light of the ongoing investigation and media attention. Please do not return to the office." The message ended with a cold beep. Mark stood in his living room, now half empty because Tessa had taken everything she liked, and the silence felt heavier than the furniture missing from the shelves. His breath quickened. His palms sweated. His eyes darted around as if searching for someone to blame. His entire world was falling apart faster than he could catch it. His phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. "Mr. Carter, your contract with Westfall Investments is terminated. Given recent allegations in the pending criminal investigation, our board cannot be associated with you." Another beep. Mark staggered backward until his legs hit the edge of the couch. He dropped onto it, feeling the cushions collapse beneath his weight, the same way his life was collapsing around him. "This isn't happening," he whispered. But it was. He ran his hands through his hair and squeezed his eyes shut, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to remember the moment everything began to unravel. And it all led back to Elena. Not the woman he pushed off the balcony, but the woman who walked into that courtroom, alive, unbroken, unafraid. It haunted him, replaying in his mind like a nightmare loop. Her steps echoing her eyes, burning the judge ordering an investigation, the whispers erupting, Tessa shaking beside him, his entire future turning to dust. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. His phone buzzed again. He didn't want to answer, but he did. "Tessa?" he asked, hopeful, desperate, but the voice wasn't gentle. "Don't call me," she snapped. "Don't text me. Don't mention my name." "Tessa, please." "I already talked to investigator," she said, voice shaking but resolute. "I told them everything I knew. I'm not going down for you, Mark. You're on your own now." The call cut off before he could reply. Mark stared at the phone, stunned. Tessa had chosen herself. He shouldn't be surprised. She was like him. She only stayed where she benefited. Now she saw him as a sinking ship. He dropped the phone onto the carpet and gripped the couch arm to steady himself. A knock hit the front door. Panicked, frantic pounding. Mark jumped, fear shooting through him. He opened the door a crack. Two men in business suits stood outside, his last investors. Their faces were furious. "You lied to us. You didn't tell us about the investigation. We're pulling out of the project today, and we'll sue if we lose a single cent because of you." Before he could explain, they turned and walked away. Mark shut the door quietly. Then he slid down until he hit the floor. Everything was gone. His career, his reputation, his partner, his investments, his future. And investigators were now building a case to prove he pushed Elena intentionally. He buried his face in his hands. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "She wasn't supposed to survive." The words trembled out of him like confession. Later that afternoon, Mark forced himself to drive to the courthouse after receiving a notice requiring his presence regarding the ongoing proceedings. The hearing itself wasn't directly about charges yet, but protective orders, financial disclosures, and next steps. He told himself he was going to fight. In reality, he wanted to see Elena again, to convince himself she was real, to grab onto any fragment of control. He saw her from across the courtyard, standing with Robert and Daniel, sunlight catching her hair, her posture steady and calm. She looked stronger, different, untouchable. Mark swallowed. His heart pounded with fear mixed with a twisted longing, a distorted echo of the marriage he destroyed. He walked toward her, rehearsing words in his mind. "Elena!" She turned. Her eyes didn't hold hate. Worse, they held nothing for him. His voice cracked. "Please, we can fix this. You need me." Her expression softened, not with love, but with the sadness reserved for someone who no longer mattered. "No, Mark," she said softly. "I don't need you." He stepped closer, grasping for anything. "But everything is falling apart. Everything. Elena, please." She held up a hand. He stopped instantly. "I didn't need your money. I didn't need your approval. I didn't need your loyalty." She paused. "I just needed the truth." Mark's face broke, truly broke, for the first time. Elena stepped back, and Robert moved between them, protective and sharp. A bailiff approached Mark. "Sir, you're violating the restraining order. Step away now." Mark backed away slowly, realizing his last plead for mercy meant nothing, and had just become another mark against him. As Elena walked toward the courthouse doors, Daniel leaned in and whispered something to her. Her eyes widened. Then her face hardened. Something had happened. Something new. And in the next hour, Mark would learn the final blow, the one that would end his downfall completely. Months later, the pen shook in Elena's hand as she lifted it toward the final line of the divorce papers. The criminal case against Mark was moving forward, the investigation now in the hands of prosecutors, but today was about something else. Today was about closing the last legal tie between them. The courthouse hallway buzzed with distant voices. But the moment she touched the paper was so intense, it felt like thunder cracking inside her chest. This signature would break the last chain Mark ever had on her life. She exhaled sharply and signed. The sound of the pen scraping across the page echoed louder than any scream she held inside during the years of betrayal. Robert Lane, standing beside her like a steadfast guardian, nodded with pride. "It's done," he said softly. "You're free, Elena. Free." The words settled over her like sunlight cutting through shadows. The rest of the world moved quickly around her, but Elena walked slowly through the courthouse doors, letting the cool air wash over her face. Her body was still healing. Her scars, seen and unseen, were still tender. But for the first time in years, she wasn't walking toward danger or fear. She was walking toward her life. A car waited to take her to her new home, a quiet place her father had left her in his will, a peaceful house with gentle light filtering through the windows, and a garden her father planted decades ago. She stepped inside, the soft scent of old books and pine drifting through the air. This home wasn't just shelter, it was healing. She touched the walls, the furniture, the dusty old sketchbooks lying untouched on a shelf. Her fingers traced faded drawings she made when she was a child. Art, her dream before love, before marriage, before the betrayal stole pieces of her. She found a blank canvas resting by the window. She sat. She picked up a pencil. She started to draw. At first her hand trembled, then it steadied, then it flowed. Line after line, stroke after stroke, she breathed out years of pain. She didn't rise for revenge. She rose because she deserved better. Later that evening, Elena opened a small velvet box she had kept sealed since the investigation. Inside was the gold bracelet, the one that started her suspicions, the one that revealed the lies, the one that symbolized everything she survived. She didn't wear it. Instead, she placed it gently on a shelf above her art table, not as a memory of pain, but as proof of resilience. A quiet reminder that even the darkest betrayal cannot dim a woman who chooses to rise. As she stood there, warm light filling the room, the world felt still and safe. Mark had celebrated when he believed she was gone. But Elena? She was celebrating something far greater. Her rebirth, her voice steady and full now, whispered the final truth. He celebrated her death, but she celebrated her rebirth. The screen would fade to soft gold, her silhouette painting in the background, a symbol of healing, strength, and new beginnings. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.